The world into which Bran was born was not a world of colors or horizons, but of warmth and heartbeat and the low, steady breath of his mother. Outside, winter had locked the northern forest in its icy grip. The wind scoured the mountainside, rattling the crowns of snow-laden pines, and drifts as high as a man's chest had buried the slopes in silence. But inside the den, carved deep into the earth and walled with the roots of old spruce trees, it was dark, close, and safe. Bran was one of two cubs, his brother slightly larger, heavier, and bolder, even from the first moments of life. They were born blind, deaf, and nearly hairless, each no heavier than a can of soup. Their pink, wrinkled skin was covered in only the faintest fuzz, and their claws were as soft as a kitten's. Yet they were alive. And in this frozen wilderness, that alone was a miracle. The den smelled of earth and old leaves, of fur, milk, and the faint mineral temps of melting ice. Their mother, huge, warm, and still recovering from months of fasting, curled her massive body around them, forming a living wall against the cold. She had not eaten since entering hibernation in the fall, relying on the fat reserves she had built over summer and autumn. Still, her body produced milk rich enough to sustain the cubs, its fat content higher than that of any other land mammal. Every drop was survival itself. For Bran, the first sensations of life were all texture and scent. The rough rasp of his mother's tongue grooming him. The press of his brother's flank against his own. The soft thud of paws shifting in the straw-lined hollow. Hunger was his constant companion, driving him to nuzzle blindly toward the warmth of his mother's belly. His brother often reached the best teat first, pushing Bran aside with surprising force for such a tiny creature. More often than not, Bran had to wriggle and wedge himself underneath his brother to find a place to drink. Even here, in the dark safety of the den, competition was a law as old as life itself. Dazor. What passed for Dazor, measured not by the sun, but by the rhythm of feeding and sleeping. Time outside moved differently. Storms howled across the peaks, snow shifted and settled, and somewhere in the valley, the frozen river groaned under the weight of ice. Inside, Bran and his brother fed, slept, and grew. Slowly, their skin thickened with furs. At first, then denser and warmer. Their tiny claws began to harden, hooked tools that one day would dig for roots, rip open rotting logs for insects, or grasped the slippery bodies of salmon. By the third week of life, Bran's ears began to open. At first, sounds were muffled and strange. The deep rumble of his mother's breathing, the faint scuffle of claws against dirt, the soft squeaks and grunts of his brother. Not long after, his eyes unsealed. The den revealed itself as a dim, earthy cave, lit only by a pale, shifting glow from the entrance tunnel. Beyond that tunnel lay a world Bran could not yet imagine. When the weather was calm, the scents drifting in from outside were tantalizing hints of another reality. Pine resin. The sharp musk of a passing fox. The faint smoke of a distant lightning-strike-scarred tree, frozen months ago. Sometimes his mother would lift her great head, nostrils flaring, sifting those scents for signs of danger. A predator, a wolf, a lynx, or, worst of all, a strange human smell would make her curl tighter around her cubs, a living fortress of fur and muscle. As winter began its slow retreat, the den's entrance grew brighter. Icicles dripped, the smell of cold water trickled in with the thaw, and the rumble of the frozen river softened to a murmur. Bran's restlessness grew with the change. He began to crawl and clamber over his mother's back, batting playfully at her ears, gnawing gently on his brother's legs. These mock battles were more than games. They were training for the challenges that lay ahead. Then, one day, the den's quiet was broken by a deep, distant crack-a-sound like the earth itself tearing apart. Snow thundered down from the ridgeline in an avalanche, a low, rolling roar that made the walls tremble. Bran froze, pressing against his mother's chest as dust and ice crystals sifted from the den roof. She remained still, ears forward, her body tense. When the sound faded, she gave a slow, deliberate huff signal of reassurance. Bran didn't understand the meaning, but he felt the truth of it in the steady rhythm of her breath. Finally, the day came when the mother bear stirred with purpose. The long sleep was over. She rose heavily, stretching muscles stiff from months of stillness, and began to groom each cub thoroughly, paying special attention to their paws and faces. Bran squirmed under the rough strokes of her tongue, but a deep instinct kept him still. She was preparing them for something. The first step outside was like touching another planet. Bran followed his brother up the sloping tunnel, paws slipping on the packed snow. At the entrance, sunlight spilled in a blinding sheet. The air was sharp and alive, carrying scents that made his head swim. His first step into the snow was a shock hold that bit into his paw pads and climbed up his legs. But even as he flinched, something inside him leaned toward it. The world was vast, bright, and endless, and every breath tasted of possibility. His brother charged forward, rolling in the snow and squealing with delight. But Bran moved more cautiously. He sniffed the air, lifting his head to catch every new scent. The resin of pines, the musky trail of a snowshoe hare, the faint promise of water flowing somewhere unseen. Their mother stood watch at the mouth of the den, her eyes scanning the tree line, every sense alert. For now, she allowed them only a few moments in the open before ushering them back inside. That night curled once more in the den's familiar darkness. Bran dreamed not in the shapeless way of newborns, but in pictures. White water rushing over rocks, silver shapes leaping from the foam, the power of his own claws closing over a writhing, shining body. He did not know yet that these were glimpses of his future. All he knew was that the den, once his whole universe, was now only a part of it. The thaw was coming, and with it, the first great journey of his life.
Spring in the northern forest does not arrive with a single day of warmth or a sudden burst of green. It creeps in slowly, melting the world one droplet at a time. The snow shrinks, exposing dark patches of soil and the flattened stalks of last summer's grass. Streams begin to hum under the ice, their voices growing louder each day. For Bran, every change outside the den was a summons. His mother led them out more often now. Each time Bran's paws grew steadier, his movements more confident. At first, his steps were cautious, each paw placed like a question. But with every venture, he learned that the snow could be trusted at least some of the time. He learned to dig his claws in when it turned slick, to bound across it when it was crusted hard. His brother raced ahead recklessly, often tumbling into drifts and emerging covered in frost. Bran followed at his own pace, sniffing, tasting, memorizing. The air was a vast library, and Bran was just beginning to learn how to read it. The scent of pine needles baking in the sun meant shelter and shade. The sharp musk of a hare told of a quick, darting shape that might someday be prey. Once the faint, bitter smell of smoke drifted through the forest, and his mother turned abruptly, her massive head swinging to scan the wind. She herded the cubs back toward the den with no explanation. Bran didn't understand, but he learned. Smoke meant leave. On warmer days, they roamed farther. His mother showed them how to dig for tender roots beneath the damp earth, and how to flip over rotting logs to find colonies of ants. Bran was fascinated by the ants' single-minded chaos, the way they clung to his fur and bit with furious precision. His brother swatted them away impatiently, but Bran lingered, nose close to the crawling swarm, committing their smell to memory. One morning, the sound of running water lured them to a narrow stream. The ice had broken in the center, revealing a ribbon of dark, fast-moving water. Bran's mother waded in without hesitation, snapping at the surface and emerging with a struggling fish in her jaws. She crushed it once, swallowed it, and then turned to watch her cubs. Bran stepped forward eagerly, the cold water biting at his legs. He plunged his paw in, missing entirely, and nearly toppled over. His brother laughed in a cub's way, a short, sharp chuffed, and tried, with no better success. They practiced until their paws were numb, then retreated to the bank, shaking and sneezing, while their mother caught fish after fish with effortless skill. Not all lessons were playful. One afternoon, a shadow slipped between the treesalinks, lean and silent, its tufted ears pricked forward. Bran didn't notice until his mother's growl rolled through the clearing, deep and dangerous. She rose to her full height, a wall of fur and muscle, and the lynx melted back into the forest without a sound. Bran felt the growl in his bones. He understood that some dangers were quiet, almost invisible, until it was too late, and he learned that his mother's presence was both shield and sword. Their den, once a snug sanctuary, was becoming only a place to sleep. Bran preferred the world beyond its mouth, where every day brought something new. The explosion of green shoots through thawed soil, the first lazy bees of the year, the way the forest floor steamed in the morning sun. He learned to listen for the drumming of woodpeckers, the rush of wind in the high branches, and the sudden stillness that meant something was watching. But the forest was not just a classroom, it was also a battlefield, and every living thing was both hunter and hunted. One day, while exploring a berry thicket just beginning to bud, Bran and his brother wandered too far ahead. The breeze shifted, and a scent hit Bran's nose sharp, unfamiliar, and dangerous. He froze, head high, ears twitching. His brother kept moving, oblivious. Then came the low, rolling snarl. It was another barren older male, heavier by 100 pounds, his fur scarred and his eyes small and mean. Bran didn't yet understand that male bears sometimes kill cubs to bring their mothers back into mating readiness, but he knew enough from his mother's reaction. She exploded forward, a blur of rage, her roar ripping through the trees. The male hesitated, gauging her strength, and then decided the fight wasn't worth it. He turned and lumbered off, snapping branches as he went. That night, Bran stayed pressed against his mother, feeling the slow rise and fall of her breathing. The forest had grown larger in his mind, not in distance, but in depth. Every rustle might be friend or foe, every scent a message, every shadow a test. And Bran was beginning to realize that one day, he would have to read those messages without his mother beside him. The thaw continued, rivers swelled with meltwater and the first insects buzzed in lazy loops over the forest floor. Bran's fur had thickened into a soft, protective coat, and his muscles were stronger now, his movements less clumsy. But the lessons of the wild were far from over. Spring had opened the door, but summer would throw it wide, and with it would come both abundance and danger in equal measure. Bran was ready to follow that door wherever it led. The forest had changed in ways Bran could feel even before he could fully understand them. The cold bite in the air had softened. The scent of sap bled rich and sweet from the pines. The earth was no longer hard and unyielding, it gave under his paws, damp and warm, releasing layers of scent from the seasons past. Everywhere, life was in motion. Birds he had never heard before sang in liquid phrases from the canopy. Insects stitched lazy patterns through the air. The mornings smelled of wet grass and the musk of waking animals. His mother's pace quickened now when she led them, her head swinging to taste the air, her body taut with purpose. Bran learned to match her stride, to keep within a paw's length even when his curiosity tugged him toward every new sound. One morning her urgency carried them farther than they had ever gone. The forest grew louder as they traveled, the deep percussion of water smashing against rock, the occasional hollow boom that echoed through the trees. The air grew heavy with a scent Bran did not know yet, rich, oily, and alive. When they broke through the last line of underbrush, the world opened into a scene that took Bran's breath in ways he could not name. Before them stretched a river wide enough that the far bank was a smear of green and shadow. The surface boiled with movement, flashes of silver erupting in arcs above the current, splashes that caught the sunlight and shattered it into shards. The smell was overwhelming, the musk of thousands of bodies, the sharp mineral taints of churning water, and underneath it all, the faint metallic scent of blood from scales torn open on stone. Bran didn't know it, but this was one of the great events of the north, the salmon run. Fish by the thousands were surging upstream to spawn, fighting against the current with a desperation that was as old as the river itself. For bears, it was a season of abundance, a feast that could make the difference between survival and starvation when winter returned. His mother wasted no time. She waded into the shallows, her paws sure on the slippery stones. The current roared against her legs, but she stood firm, her eyes locked on the flashing bodies. Then, in one explosive motion, she plunged her head down, jaws snapping shut around a salmon that thrashed wildly in protest. She emerged dripping, the fish still writhing, and with a single bite to its neck, ended its struggle. Bran watched, entranced. His brother made the first bold attempt, charging into the water with all the grace of a tumbling boulder. The current caught him, spinning him sideways, but he scrambled to his paws and swiped clumsily at a fish. He missed, again and again, but his enthusiasm never faltered. Bran followed, stepping cautiously into the icy water. The river's force shocked him, it pushed and pulled at his legs, numbing his paws instantly. The salmon were blurs of muscle and light, darting past before he could even raise a paw. He tried swiping like his mother, but the fish seemed to vanish the moment he moved. Frustration burned in his chest. His brother, by sheer luck, managed to trap one against a rock, though it slipped free before he could lift it. Their mother caught fish after fish, her movements efficient, almost effortless. Each one she caught was carried to the bank where she ate quickly but without waste. Sometimes she left the head and spine for the cubs to gnaw, letting them taste the richness of fresh salmon. Bran sank his teeth into the soft flesh, the oily fat coating his tongue in a way no food before had. It was a taste that spoke to something deep in his bones: strength, growth, survival. Over the next days, the river became their classroom. Bran learned to read the water, the eddies that slowed the current, the glints of silver that betrayed a salmon's approach. He learned to strike not where the fish was, but where it would be in the next heartbeat. His first real catch came on the 4th day. The fish was small, but it was his, and he carried it proudly to the bank, chest puffed, ignoring his brother's mocked growl of jealousy. But the river was not only a place of feasting, it was also a stage for competition. Other bears began to arrive, drawn by the scent of the run. Most kept their distance from the mother bear and her cubs, but not all. One evening, as the light softened to gold and the air cooled, a massive male emerged from the trees on the far bank. His fur was dark and wet, scars crisscrossing his muzzle and shoulders. His eyes fixed on the shallows where Bran's mother stood. Without a sound, he waded into the river, the water surging up to his chest. Bran felt the change in his mother before he understood it. Her body stiffened, her head lowered, lips pulling back to reveal teeth as white as the river foam. She growled a deep rolling thunder that seemed to shake the stones under his paws. The male answered with a low rumble, then surged forward, water exploding around him. The fight was swift and brutal. They reared onto their hind legs, striking with paws that could break bone in a single blow. The sound of impact was like logs cracking in a fire. Bran and his brother huddled at the bank, hearts pounding, as their mother forced the male back step by step. Finally, with a savage lunge, she drove him sideways into the current. The river caught him, spinning him downstream until he vanished around a bend. Panting, her fur slick with water, she returned to the cub. She didn't speak, bears never did, but the lesson was carved into Bran as clearly as if it had been spoken. The river gave, but you had to fight to keep what it gave you. That night, as they lay together on the riverbank, Bran watched the moonlight shiver across the water. The silver arcs of salmon leaping seemed almost like stars falling into the river's dark throat. He dreamed of them, of the strike, the weight in his jaws, the taste of strength, and knew the river would always call to him, as long as he lived. Summer in the northern forest came with a suddenness that felt almost violent. The snow was gone as if it had never been, leaving behind a world swollen with green. Ferns unfurled along the banks, their fronds trembling in the light breeze. The air was thick with the hum of insects, and the canopy glowed with the deep, wet green of leaves in their prime. For Bran, every step into this season was a step into abundance. Berries swelled along the low bushes, bright clusters of red and blue. Ant hills erupted like tiny fortresses on the forest floor, each alive with endless motion. Bat grubs curled in the rotting logs his mother tore open, their pale bodies glistening in the sun. Every day his world seemed to offer more food than he could possibly eat. But summer was not only about plenty, it was also about growth. The rich meals of salmon and berries began to fill out Bran's frame. His muscles thickened under his fur. His claws, once small and soft, had hardened into dark scythes. His teeth itched constantly with the need to gnaw, and he tested them on everything stick spark, even the bones of last winter's kills. His brother grew too, always pushing ahead, always trying to prove his strength in their mock battles. Their mother still led them far each day, teaching them where to find the best food, how to travel silently when the wind shifted, and how to read the forest with their noses. But now, danger hid behind the beauty. One afternoon they came upon a meadow buzzing with bees. The air was thick with their scent, sweet, floral, and heavy. Bran watched as his mother approached a fallen tree where the bees had made their hive. She tore into the soft wood with her claws, ignoring the furious swarm. The reward was a dripping mass of honeycomb, golden and warm. She shared it with the cubs, and Bran's mouth filled with a sweetness unlike anything he had ever tasted. They were still licking the honey from their paws when a new scent reached them, sharp, acrid, and strange. Bran froze. His mother's head snapped up, nostrils wide, eyes scanning the edge of the meadow. The smell grew stronger, smoke, metal, and something sour that made Bran's fur prickle. Then came the sound of faint mechanical growl, low and steady. Humans. Bran had never seen one, but he had heard the wordless warning in his mother's body every time their scent drifted through the wind. Now, the danger was not far away, it was here. She gave a sharp huff, the sound that meant move. Now. Bran followed instantly, his paws silent in the grass, his brother at his side. They slipped back into the trees, their mother's massive shape always between them and the sound. From the safety of the undergrowth, Bran caught his first glimpse. Two figures moving along the meadow's edge. tall and narrow with strange coverings on their bodies. They carried long, dark objects in their hands, and even at a distance, Bran could feel their focus like heat. His mother waited, muscles coiled, until they disappeared into the far tree line. Only then did she lead them away, keeping to the deepest shadows. That night they slept in a dense thicket, the scent of humans still faint on the breeze. Bran couldn't shake the image of them, their upright walk, the way they scanned the meadow. They were unlike any predator he had seen, but the fear they stirred in his mother told him all he needed to know. They were dangerous in ways claws and teeth could not answer. The days that followed were tense. His mother avoided the open spaces she had once crossed without hesitation. They traveled deeper into the forest, where the trees grew close and the undergrowth muffled every step. Bran noticed more signs of humans now, trees with their bark stripped away, strange lines carved into the earth, even a piece of shiny metal half buried in the mud. The forest was changing, and not all of it was the work of seasons, but life went on. The salmon run tapered off, replaced by the ripening of blueberries and raspberries. Bran learned to strip the bushes clean with his lips, careful not to crush the fruit into the dirt. He learned to roll logs and pounce on the insects underneath. His strength grew with every meal, and he began to feel the restless pull that came with it, the urge to roam farther, to see what lay beyond the next ridge. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the forest gold, Bran wandered a little too far from the others. He was following the scent of a fresh carcass, perhaps a deer taken down by wolves, when a new sound froze him in place. It was the same mechanical growl he had heard in the meadow, but closer now, pulsing through the trees. His heart hammered. Through a gap in the brush, he saw it, a strange creature of metal and wheels, crawling over the forest floor. A human sat atop it, steering it with his arms. The thing roared as it moved, chewing the earth into strips. Bran backed away, one slow step at a time, until the sound faded into the distance. When he found his mother again, she sniffed him all over, then gave a low growl, not anger, but warning. The forest had taught many lessons, but this one was now carved deepest of all. Some dangers you could face, but others you could only avoid. Summer still lay heavy over the land, but Bran could sense that change was coming. The days were just a little shorter now, the nights a little cooler. The forest was shifting again, and with it, his life would shift too. The warning signs came quietly. The air grew heavy, thick enough to taste. Clouds gathered over the ridges, dark and swollen, pressing low against the treetops. The forest's usual chorus birdsong, insect hum, the far-off whisper of wind fell into uneasy silence. Even the river seemed to hold its breath. Bran felt it before he understood it. The air smelled charged, like stone struck by lightning, and the fur along his spine prickled. His mother's movements were sharp, her head swinging to check the sky. She herded the cubs toward higher ground, but the first raindrops came faster than she could climb. They were not the soft, cool drops of a summer shower. They were heavy, warm impacts that splattered dirt and flattened ferns. Within minutes the sky opened fully, and the rain came down in sheets, hammering leaves and drumming against Bran's back. The forest blurred into streaks of green and gray. They sheltered under the broad arms of a fallen spruce. Its roots twisted into a wall of earth. Water poured through the gaps, soaking the ground until it turned to slick mud. Thunder rolled across the valley, deep and long, followed by the tearing crack of lightning striking somewhere close. Bran flinched with each flash, his ears folding back against the noise. Then came the sound that drowned out even the storm, a low, continuous roar that grew with terrifying speed. His mother's head snapped toward it. She gave a single sharp huff, and Bran knew without thinking. Run. The roar was water. They scrambled from their shelter, paws slipping on the mud. The rain had swollen the river beyond its banks, and now it surged down the valley in a churning wall of brown foam and debris. Logs spun in the current, smashing against each other with deadly force. The air was filled with the smell of uprooted earth and torn plants. Bran's mother led them uphill, angling away from the flood's path. But the forest floor had become a trap of rivulets and sudden streams, each one deeper and faster than it looked. Bran leaped over one, splashing into the next, his legs sinking to the knee. His brother pushed ahead, scrambling after their mother. Bran was a few steps behind when his paw caught on a submerged root. He stumbled. The water seized him instantly, pulling him off his feet. Cold swallowed him, spinning him in a rush of current that filled his nose and mouth. He thrashed, claws clawing for something solid, but the river was all movement and noise, dragging him deeper into its hungry throat. Through the chaos, he glimpsed his mother on the bank, her eyes locked on him, her roar cutting through the storm. She surged into the current, each step a battle, closing the distance with terrifying strength. Her jaws clamped onto the loose skin at the back of his neck, and in one brutal heave, she tore him free of the water's grip. They stumbled onto a narrow shelf of earth. Gasping, Bran's heart pounded like it would break through his ribs. His mother shook herself, spraying water in wide arcs, then pushed her muzzle into his fur, sniffing hard as if to confirm he was whole. But the storm was not done. The flood split around the hillside, sending a smaller torrent slicing between Bran and his brother. The younger bear stood on the far side, eyes wide, the ground crumbling beneath his paws. The current between them was too fast to cross, too deep to wade. Bran's mother roared at the gap, pacing along the bank, searching for a way across. But each attempt to step into the current was met with water that tried to tear her downstream. The storm's fury showed no sign of easing. For long minutes, they could only watch each other across the water, mother and cub separated by a river that had not been there an hour before. Bran called in short, panicked grunts, his brother answering in the same frightened rhythm. Finally, his mother made a decision. She turned to Bran, nudged him hard toward the uphill slope, and began to climb, her posture urgent and unyielding. Bran hesitated, looking back at his brother, but his mother's second nudge was stronger. He followed. They climbed until the ground leveled under a dense stand of pines. From here, they could see the valley below transformed into a boiling, shifting lake. Trees leaned at impossible angles, and the roar of the water was constant, unbroken. Somewhere in that chaos, his brother was on another patch of high ground, out of sight. They waited out the storm in the pines. Bran pressed against his mother's side, the air cold with rain and fear. When the rain finally thinned to a drizzle, the valley was unrecognizably wide. Muddy scar where the river had torn through. Bran searched the banks for movement, for any glimpse of his brother's dark fur among the wreckage. But the flood had swallowed everything. The salmon pools, the berry thickets, the quiet paths they had walked together. The separation was not final. Bran did not yet understand how far a bear could travel to find its own, but in that moment, the absence felt like a hole in the world. And for the first time, Bran felt the wild not just as a place of beauty and plenty, but as a force that could take without warning, without mercy. The morning after the flood smelled different. The air was sharp with the tang of raw earth and broken plants, and the valley below lay in ruin. Where the river had once been a winding silver ribbon, it now sprawled wide and brown, its banks torn open, littered with splintered logs and uprooted trees. Pools of stagnant water steamed in the cool air, their surfaces slick with silt. Bran stood at the edge of the hillside, scanning the chaos for any sign of his brother. The forest was awake again, the cry of a jay somewhere behind them, the drip of water from leaves, but the silence in the valley was heavier than sound. His mother began moving before Bran could think. She climbed down toward the floodplain, paws sinking deep into the wet earth. Every step released a hidden world in the mud, the musk of drowned voles, the faint tang of fish stranded by the retreating water. And somewhere, Bran thought, the trace of his brother. They searched slowly, methodically. His mother's nose skimmed every track, every ripple in the mud. Bran followed close, trying to read the ground as she did. He saw the deep impressions of a moose's hooves, the lighter steps of a fox, and prints that were his own from the day before, blurred now by rain, then different. A set of bear tracks, smaller than his mother's, but larger than his own, pressed into the wet silt. The claw marks were sharp, the edges still holding their shape. Bran's heart thudded. His brother. The trail led upstream, hugging the edge of a new channel carved by the flood. They followed, their pace quickening. At every bend, Bran expected to see a dark shape ahead, to hear the familiar chuff of greeting. But the tracks kept going, weaving through driftwood and debris, until the scent faded under the roar of the river. By midday, the sun had burned away the morning mist. The valley was hot and bright, the mud beginning to crack under the heat. The tracks had disappeared where the new channel deepened into a swift, foaming current. Bran's mother stood still for a long time, her gaze fixed on the water. She made a low, almost inaudible rumble, not frustration, but thought. Then she turned away. Bran hesitated, glancing back at the river. He didn't understand. His brother's trail had ended here. Wasn't that where they should stay? But his mother moved with certainty, her body language firm. The search was not over, but it would not be won by waiting in one place. They traveled upriver for days, weaving between the broken skeletons of fallen trees. Food was scarce here. The flood had stripped the valley of berries and drowned the ground-nesting insects. They scavenged what they could, stranded, fish half buried in silt, roots exposed by the churning water. Each meal was small, gone in moments, leaving their bellies still hollow. The further they went, the more the forest changed. The air grew cooler, the nights longer. The leaves of the birch trees had begun to fade from deep green to a tired yellow. Bran didn't know the word for it, but autumn was coming, and with it, the urgency to eat as much as possible before the cold returned. One evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, they found themselves in a narrow canyon where the river ran deep and slow. The high walls trapped the sound of water, turning it into a constant whisper. It was here they caught the scent. Bear, young, male. Bran's pulse leaped. They followed it carefully, moving in the shadows cast by the canyon walls. The scent grew stronger, mingled with the smell of fish oil. Around a bend, Bran's mother stopped abruptly. There, on the gravel shore, was a young bear. His fur was dark with river water, his muzzle buried in the belly of a half-eaten salmon. He was larger now than Bran remembered, but the set of his ears, the tilt of his head, it was him, his brother. Bran gave a small, involuntary grunt of recognition. The young bear's head shot up, eyes locking on them. For a heartbeat there was stillness, the air stretched thin between them. Then, with a huff that could have been relief or warning, the brother backed away from the fish. He glanced once at Bran, then turned and loped into the trees. Bran surged forward, but his mother blocked him with her body. She didn't chase. She simply stood, watching the place where the young bear had vanished. Bran could smell her restrained caution layered over recognition. His brother was alive, but he was different now, alone, learning the forest's rules without her protection. That night, Bran lay curled beside his mother under a stand of pines, the scent of his brother still vivid in his mind. He had thought the reunion would be an ending, but now he understood it was only another kind of beginning. The wild did not tie its children down. It released them, and the space between them was filled with distance, danger, and the endless work of survival. The wind carried the first real chill of the season through the needles overhead. Bran tucked his nose under his paw, listening to the river's voice in the dark. Somewhere out there, his brother was listening too. Autumn came quietly, almost politely at first. The days shortened, but the light was still warm. The leaves turned from green to gold, then to a deep rust red that set the hillsides glowing. Mushrooms sprouted in damp hollows. The air carried the dry, sweet scent of fallen leaves crushed underfoot. But beneath the beauty, Bran felt the shift. The berry bushes that had been heavy with fruit in summer now hung bare. The insects that had swarmed the air were fewer, their wings silenced by the cold nights. Even the salmon runs had dwindled, leaving only the occasional straggler in the shallows. Food was harder to find. Bran's mother pushed them farther each day, ranging into territories they had never crossed before. She led them to oak stands where acorns lay scattered, to windswept ridges where the last berries clung stubbornly to their stems, and to muddy wallows where the scent of roots ran strong. Every meal mattered now, not just for today's hunger, but for the fat they needed to survive the winter. Hunger sharpened Bran's senses. He noticed every bird call, every movement in the brush, every faint smell the wind carried. One evening, as they moved along a game trail, a new scent stopped him cold. It was sharp, musky, and edged with a coppery tense. Not bear, not deer, wolf. His mother smelled it too. She froze, head high, ears pricked forward. Her body went still, the stillness of a stone before the strike. Bran followed her gaze to a distant ridge, where shapes moved among the trees, low, lean, and silent, their coats gray and thick. The wolves kept their distance, but their eyes tracked the bears as they moved. Bran felt their stare in his fur. He knew from his mother's posture that they were dangerous, not because they were stronger, they were not, but because they were many, and they hunted with patience. For 2 days, the wolves shadowed them. Bran caught glimpses, a flash of movement between birches, the glint of eyes in the dusk, paw prints fresh in the mud near the river. Once, in the deep hours of night, he woke to the sound of their howls rolling through the valley, a chorus that made the fur on his neck stand tall. It was on the 3rd day that hunger forced the lesson. They had been following the scent of a deer carcass, likely a wolf kill, when the trail led them to a narrow meadow. The wind shifted, and Bran caught the smell of blood, thick and iron-rich. His mouth watered. But before they could reach the body, a wolf stepped into the open, its muzzle red, eyes fixed on them. Another emerged to its right, and another of the pack was there. Bran's mother moved forward, her size and presence pushing the wolves back a few steps. She growled, the sound deep enough to vibrate through Bran's chest. The wolves answered with a chorus of snarls, their tails stiff, ears forward. It was not a fight the wolves wanted, not against a healthy mother bear, but neither would they give up their kill without a test. One lunged forward, snapping at the air, trying to draw her into a chase. Another circled toward Bran's flank. His mother wheeled, swiping with a paw that cut the air inches from the wolf's muzzle. The pack shifted, reading her every move. They were calculating, looking for weakness. Bran understood then. The wolves were not here for her. They were here for him. The moment stretched, tense and brittle. Then his mother surged forward, roaring so loud the trees seemed to shake. The wolves broke, melting into the forest shadows. In seconds, the meadow was empty, but for the sound of Bran's own heartbeat. They left the carcass untouched. His mother led him away without looking back. That night, Bran thought of the wolves, eyes cold, unblinking, and patient. He realized that survival was not always about strength. Sometimes it was about denying your enemy the moment they were waiting for. A few days later, the chance for a different kind of lesson came. They were moving along a rocky stream when his mother froze. Nose high, Bran followed her gaze to a shape in the shallows. A beaver, brown and slick-furred, chewing at a sapling's base. It was large, fat from summer, its tail slapping lazily at the water. His mother moved with precision now, each step silent. Bran mirrored her as best he could, feeling the tension in his muscles coil tight. She stopped just at the water's edge, waited, then lunged. The beaver bolted, but her paw slammed it against the stones in an explosion of spray. She bit once, and it went still. Then she stepped back. Bran understood it was his turn. He approached the body cautiously, the smell of warm meat filling his nose. His claws dug into its fur as he bent to bite. The taste was rich, oily, and heavy with life. This was not berries or fish, it was prey taken on land, and it felt different in his teeth. When they finished, Bran licked his muzzle clean. The beaver's scent still thick in his fur. He felt the weight of what he had learned, not just how to take a meal, but the patience and silence it required. The leaves were falling faster now, spinning down in red and gold spirals. Winter was coming, and with it, the long sleep. But before they could rest, there was more to learn, more to eat, and more dangers waiting in the shadows of the forest. The forest was changing faster now. The green had drained from the leaves, replaced by fire, gold, orange, deep crimson. The air was dry and cool, and each gust of wind rattled the branches, sending a rain of leaves swirling down to carpet the forest floor. Bran could smell the shift not just in the air, but in the animals themselves. Squirrels raced along the ground with cheeks stuffed full. Woodpeckers drummed tirelessly, and the deer had grown thick-necked and restless. For Bran and his mother, it was the final race to eat enough before the long winter sleep. Every waking hour was spent searching, digging, breaking, hunting. His belly was rarely empty, yet hunger pushed them onward. Instinct whispered that enough was never truly enough. One afternoon, as they skirted the edge of a berry thicket stripped nearly bare, the wind carried a scent that made Bran's hackles rise. It was bear strong, male, and close. His mother froze, head high, nostrils flaring. The figure emerged from the shadows of the spruce, a massive boar, his fur thick and dark, shoulders broad as a fallen log. His muzzle was crisscrossed with old scars, his eyes small and glinting with hunger. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if the forest itself made way for him. Bran had seen males before, but never like this. This one radiated authority, the kind that came from years of surviving fights that could have killed him, and this one wasn't here to share. The boar's gaze fixed on Bran's mother, then flicked to Bran. It was a glance full of calculation. Male bears sometimes killed cubs, forcing the mothers back into estrus. Bran didn't know the term, but he felt the meaning in the way the stranger's muscles tensed. His mother rose onto her hind legs, towering over Bran, and let out a roar that shook the air. The boar answered, deeper and slower, and began to circle. The fight came suddenly to mountains colliding. Paws swung like axes, claws tearing fur. The sound of their impacts was heavy, sickening. Bran backed into the underbrush, heart hammering, as the two bears slammed into the ground, rolling, snapping, roaring. For a moment, it seemed his mother would be pushed back. The boar's weight drove her toward the base of a tree, teeth snapping inches from her throat. Then, with a surge of power Bran had never seen before, she twisted, driving her claws into his shoulder. The boar bellowed and stumbled back, blood matting his fur. He backed away, snarling, but didn't try again. The fight was over. Bran's mother stood over the patch of trampled leaves, chest heaving, eyes still locked on him until the dark shape melted into the trees. The next days were quieter, but the urgency in his mother's movements never eased. They found an oak grove littered with acorns and dug greedily until their paws were raw. They tore open a fallen log crawling with fat beetle grubs. Bran even caught his first snowshoe hare, clumsy but quick enough. Each victory added weight to his frame, layers of fat beneath his thickening fur. Then, one morning, frost rimed the grass. Bran's breath smoked in the cold air. His mother led him up a slope to a sheltered hollow in the hillside, its mouth half hidden by roots and stone. The smell inside was dry and earthy. It was not a hunting ground. It was home for the winter to come. Bran sniffed every corner of the den, his claws scraping softly against the packed dirt. He felt the stillness in it, the sense of waiting. Outside the forest still bustled, but here time seemed to slow, to fold in on itself. They would feed for a few more days yet, his mother's instincts urging her to add the last reserves of strength. But Bran knew, without understanding how, that the season of movement was ending. Soon the snow would fall and the forest would quiet. And when they lay down in this dark hollow, it would hold them for months safely, silently until the world was ready to wake again. But for now, the air was crisp, the ground still bare, and there was food left to find. Bran stepped out of the den, nose to the wind, ready to follow his mother into the fading light of autumn's last feast. The first snow came at night. Bran woke to the silence of it, the deep, soft quiet that falls over the forest when the world is being wrapped in white. Outside the den, flakes swirled down through the black branches, vanishing into the drifts that had begun to gather along the hillside. The air was sharp enough to sting his nose, heavy with the smell of ice and pine. For days, the snow came and went, each storm laying another pale layer over the land. The berry bushes disappeared beneath it, the streams slowed, then froze. The forest floor became a vast, unbroken sheet of white, broken only by the dark lines of game trails. The cold was constant now, seeping through fur and skin into the bone. Bran's mother knew it was time. They returned to the din, carrying with them the last of the autumn mess, weight their bodies thick and heavy with the fat that would keep them alive. The entrance was narrow, just wide enough for her massive frame to squeeze through, but once inside it opened into a chamber of dry earth. She turned in slow circles, pressing the floor smooth, and then settled into a great curve of fur and warmth. Bran curled against her belly, his body fitting into the hollow between her forelegs. The day shrank to nothing. Outside, storms raged across the mountains, piling snow high against the den's mouth, muffling the world into silence. Inside, time lost its meaning. Bran slept, waking only to shift positions or press closer to his mother's warmth. His heart slowed, his breathing became shallow. Hunger no longer drove him. His body had entered the deep stillness of hibernation. In that stillness, dreams came. He dreamed of the salmon river, its silver arcs breaking the water's skin. He dreamed of the oak grove, the acorns, sweet and bitter on his tongue. He dreamed of his brother, standing across a river that roared between them, eyes bright with something Bran could not name. In his dreams, the forest was always green, the air always warm, and food always within reach. But the dreams did not always stay gentle. Sometimes the river turned dark, rushing toward him with the roar of the flood. Sometimes the wolf's eyes glowed from the tree line, and sometimes the scent of smoke drifted into his sleep, sharp and sour, pulling him toward a shadow that did not belong to the forest. One day, though, in the den, days and nights were only the rise and fall of breath. The smell was real. It came faint at first, threading through the packed snow over the entrance. Not pine, not storm, not any scent Bran had known in the wild. It was the human smell, oil, metal, and something acrid that made his lungs tighten. His mother stirred, her body tensing. Footsteps crunched outside, slow and deliberate. Shadows moved against the pale light that filtered through the snow at the den's mouth. Bran heard voices low, muffled, and strange. Then came a new sound, sharp and metallic, tapping at the frozen ground. His mother did not move toward the entrance. She lay utterly still, her eyes open and fixed on the sound, her body a wall between Bran and whatever waited beyond. The voices grew louder for a moment, then faded. The footsteps receded into the forest. It was a long time before her breathing slowed again. The smell lingered for hours, even after the snow drifted back into place. Bran pressed himself tighter against her side, the heat of her body steady against the cold. He didn't understand why the scent of humans carried such weight, but he knew this. In the heart of winter, when food was gone and the forest slept, some dangers could still find their way to your door. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the den returned to stillness. Bran drifted back into sleep, the scent of humans fading into the cold air. His dreams carried him once more to the river, to the open green world, to the life that would return when the snow finally melted. For now, he slept in. The forest slept with him. The first sign that winter was loosening its grip was not the sound of melting snow, but the smell. It came faint through the packed earth and snow over the den, a damp, green scent, carrying hints of thawed soil and waking plants. The air through the entrance was warmer, softer, almost tasting of sunlight. Bran stirred in his sleep, muscles stiff from months of stillness. His mother shifted beside him, her great body unfolding with deliberate slowness. She licked his face once, a touch that was both a greeting and an instruction. It was time. They emerged into a world still half in winter's grasp. Snow lay in thick patches on the slopes, but the valleys below showed ribbons of brown earth and the first shy shoots of green. The river, once locked in ice, moved again, its voice a low, steady murmur. Bran's paws felt clumsy at first. His muscles ached with the effort of climbing over snowdrifts and picking through the fallen branches winter had scattered. But with each day, the stiffness faded, replaced by the old strength he had built the year before, and something new, heavier in his chest, the hunger of spring. Food was scarce at first. They dug up roots from thawed soil, tore apart ant nests hidden under rotting logs, and sought the earliest shoots along sunny slopes. The meals were small, gone too quickly, but each bite fed the fire of movement. Bran's mother pushed them farther each day, following the river's winding course as it swelled with On the third morning, the wind brought an old, sharp scent. Bran froze mid-step, his nose lifting. Wolves, it had been months since the grey shadows had followed them, but the memory returned instantly. The cold eyes, the patient circling, the understanding that they hunted not with strength but with time. His mother caught the scent too and changed their path, moving along the ridge where the snow still lay thick. That night, Bran heard them, faint at first, single notes echoing across the valley, then joined by others, weaving together into a long rising howl. It was not near, but it was not far either. By morning the howls had faded, replaced by the rush of the river below, and with it came another scent, rich, oily, and alive. Bran's pulse quickened. Salmon. They reached the river by midday. It was smaller than the great run of summer, but still, silver shapes flashed in the current. Bran waded in without hesitation. The water was ice-cold, numbing his legs, but his eyes tracked the movement. He struck once, missed, struck again this time, his paw connected, flinging a fish onto the gravel bank. It thrashed wildly, but Bran was on it in a heartbeat, his teeth sinking into flesh. The taste filled him with something deeper than hunger could explain. It was memory. It was the river's promise kept. For hours they fished, moving from pool to pool. Bran's skill had grown, his strikes were quicker, his aim sharper. By the time the sun dipped low, they had eaten their fill, the heaviness in Bran's belly a rare comfort after the lean days. But as they rested on the bank, Bran noticed something upstream. A dark figure stood in the shallows, massive shoulders hunched, water streaming from its fur. Even at a distance, Bran knew it was the same boar his mother had fought last autumn. The boar did not move toward them, but his presence was enough to stir unease. This was a shared river now, and sooner or later, shared rivers demanded decisions. Bran looked to his mother. She watched the boar for a long moment, then turned downstream, her body language calm but certain. She would not fight today. There was more river ahead, more fish, and more days to claim what they needed. As they moved on, Bran felt the pull of something new, an awareness of choice. Not every challenge had to be met head-on, and not every territory needed to be claimed in blood. Sometimes survival meant stepping aside, for now, and coming back when the river was ready to give again. That night, with the sound of the current in his ears, Bran fell asleep on the riverbank. In his dreams, the water ran silver forever, and the banks were his alone. The signs came slowly at first. His mother no longer waited for him when he stopped to investigate scents. She no longer nudged him toward the best feeding spots or corrected his steps when they crossed a slick log. And sometimes more and more often she disappeared for hours, returning with the scent of other bears on her fur. Bran was nearly full-grown now, his shoulders broad, his legs heavy with muscle. The seasons had carved him into something leaner and stronger than the cub that had stumbled into the river 2 springs ago. And with that strength came a pull in his blood, a restless urge to walk farther, to see what lay beyond the ridges they had always stayed within. One morning, as the sun filtered gold through the spruce canopy, his mother simply turned down a game trail without looking back. Bran watched her go, the sound of her steps fading into the undergrowth. For the first time, he did not follow. The forest felt different alone. Every sound was sharper, every scent more vivid. Without her presence, the air seemed colder, the ground less certain under his paws. But there was something else, space. Space to move where he wanted, to claim the trails she had never taken, to make the decisions without looking for her lead. Hunger followed him like a shadow. Spring's early abundance faded faster than he expected. The small salmon run was over, and the berry bushes were only in flower. Roots and insects could keep him moving, but they did not fill the deep hollowness in his belly. He followed deer trails, but the deer were strong and fast in this season, slipping away before he could close the gap. Days passed. Hunger sharpened into something mean, an ache that made his thoughts heavy. He began to take risks, digging into wasp nests for their fat larvae, chasing beavers in the shallows, even scavenging from the edge of wolf kills when the pack had moved on. It was on one of these scavenging trails that he found the carcass. A moose cow lay in a marshy hollow, her ribs split open by teeth and time. The air was thick with the smell of rot, but the meat still clung to her flanks. Bran stepped forward, his muzzle lowering, then froze. Another scent bear. The figure emerged from the willow thicket like a shadow torn from the ground. It was a young male, larger than Bran by a head, his fur darker and his eyes sharp with the same hunger that burned in Bran's own body. He stopped a few paces from the carcass, lowering his head but never breaking Bran's gaze. The message was clear. Mine. Bran hesitated. Instinct urged him to avoid the fight, turn away, find food elsewhere. But the ache in his belly was louder, and something else, too, a stubbornness, a refusal to give way. The first lunge was sudden. The dark bear came fast, teeth bared, a roar ripping through the marsh air. Bran met him head-on, their bodies slamming together with a force that sent water spraying. Claws raked through fur, teeth found flesh. They reared up, striking, shoving, twisting in the muck. The dark bear was stronger, but Bran was quicker. He feinted to the side, letting the others' weight carry him forward, then drove his shoulder into the opponent's flank. They crashed into the moose carcass, the stench exploding around them. The fight broke as quickly as it began. The dark bear backed off, breathing hard, a line of blood dripping from his muzzle. He gave a low, grudging rumble, then turned into the willows and was gone. Bran stood over the carcass, sides heaving. His body throbbed with fresh cuts, his muscles quivered with fatigue, but he had won. He ate until his stomach could hold no more, the meat heavy and rich on his tongue. That night he slept curled in a bed of dry grass near the marsh, the moose's scent still on his fur. The ache of hunger was gone, replaced by something deeper, the understanding that in this new life alone, nothing would be given freely. Every meal, every stretch of land, every step of riverbank would have to be taken, and taken again, until it was truly his. The marsh fight had changed something in Bran, not just in his body though. The cuts along his shoulder had healed into pale scars, but in the way he walked the forest. His path was no longer just movement, it was a map. The ridges, the river bends, the berry slopes, he marked them now, rubbing his scent into tree trunks, raking his claws deep into bark. This was his, but a claim was only as strong as the will to defend it. One evening, as the sun bled orange along the horizon, Bran caught a scent he knew too well. The dark bear from the marsh. It was fresher than it should have been, and it was inside Bran's new boundary. His muscles tensed. He followed the trail through a tangle of alders, until he saw the shape moving in the half-light, broad-shouldered, slow, deliberate, sniffing at the berry bushes as if tasting Bran's claim. A low growl built in Bran's chest. The dark bear turned, lips peeling back in a silent snarl. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Bran stepped forward, each pace heavy, deliberate. The dark bear held his ground, but his ears flicked back, a subtle crack in his confidence. Bran didn't need a fight this time. He came close enough for his shadow to touch the other's paws, then slammed his claws into the nearest tree, shredding the bark in a rain of splinters. The sound was sharp in the evening stillness. The dark bear huffed, a reluctant concession, and melted into the undergrowth. It was a victory without blood, but Bran knew it wouldn't be the last challenge. The real threat came from another direction. It began with a smell on the wind oil, smoke, and something metallic. Not wolves, not bear. Humans' descent grew stronger over the next days, drifting from the north edge of his range. Then came the sounds, the distant growl of machines, the sharp ring of metal against wood, the hollow thud of trees falling. Curiosity pulled him closer. Skirting the ridges, he moved downwind until he reached a break in the trees. The sight below froze him. The forest had been cut open. Where there had been spruce and birch, there was now open ground littered with stumps, the earth torn and raw. Strange objects of metal and glass squatted among the debris. Humans moved between them, carrying tools, stacking logs. The smell of food drifted from their campmeat grain, the rich scent of fat. Bran's stomach knotted with hunger. He watched from the shadows until night fell, the humans' voices replaced by the faint hum of machines and the flicker of firelight. The pull was too strong. He moved silently down the slope, his paws soundless in the leaf litter. The camp smelled of everything unnatural, but the food was there in crates, in metal boxes, in scraps scattered around the edges. Bran nosed through the debris, finding meat still clinging to bone, bread gone hard, but still rich with scent. Then a noisy, sharp metallic click cut the night. Bran froze. From the darkness beyond the firelight, 2 points of red glowed. A figure stepped forward, carrying something long and black. Bran's muscles coiled. The human lifted the object to its shoulder. Instinct saved him. He bolted, crashing through the undergrowth as a deafening crack split the air. The ground near his hind paw exploded in dirt and splinters. He ran until the camp's smell was gone, the only sound his own breath hammering in his ears. By dawn he had reached the safety of the riverbank. The wound was not physical, no. Bullet had found him, but the threat was burned into him as surely as any scar. Humans were not like the dark bear, or wolves, or the flood. They did not fight for food, or territory, or dominance. They took without warning, from a distance no claw could reach. From that day, Bran kept to the deep forest when the wind carried the human scent. But he knew the boundary was changing. Not just his territorial territory, the lines in the forest were being redrawn, and not by bears. By the time Bran's third summer came, his body had reached its full weight, thick shoulders, heavy legs, a neck corded with muscle. The forest knew him now. His scent marked the ridges, the riverbanks, and the berry slopes. He had driven off the dark bear twice more that spring, each time with less hesitation, each time holding the ground a little longer. But the human smell had never left the north edge of his range. It drifted in on certain winds, faint but steady, a reminder that danger could move without sound. The trees there were fewer now. The distant growl of machines sometimes carried as far as the river. The river itself had become his Centaura Broadbend, where salmon pooled before leaping the rapids. It was here Bran fed. Here he stood against challengers. Here he felt most like the master of something that was his alone. It was here the two threats finally met. The day began with a heavy mist clinging to the water. Bran waded into the shallows, eyes tracking the silver flashes beneath the surface. He had just hauled a salmon onto the gravel when a low, rolling growl slid through the fog. The dark bear stepped into view at the far side of the pool. His fur was matted from travel, his eyes bright with hunger. This time, there was no circling, no display. He waded straight in. Bran met him halfway. The water churned around their legs as they rose to strike. The first blows were heavy, measured testing strength. Then the dark bear lunged, teeth snapping for Bran's neck. Bran twisted, driving his shoulder into the other's ribs, forcing him back with a roar that split the morning air. They clashed again, water exploding between them. Bran's paw raked across the dark bear's muzzle, drawing a line of blood. The other stumbled, then lunged once more, their bodies locking in a violent push that sent them crashing toward the bank. That was when the sound came, a sharp metallic crack, far louder than thunder. Both bears froze. The mist parted enough for Bran to see them, two humans on the bank above, one lifting the long black object to his shoulder again. The dark bear bolted instantly, crashing into the undergrowth. Bran followed the instinct before thought running, water flying from his paws as another crack split the air. A branch above him shattered into splinters. He didn't stop until the forest swallowed him, the river's roar replaced by his own pounding heart. He could still smell the humans on the wind, sharp, sour, edged with smoke. For the rest of the day he stayed in the high ridges, moving silently through spruce shadows. Hunger gnawed at him, but the river bend was no longer safe. He had learned something the dark bear already seemed to know. Against humans, there was no fight. That night, he returned cautiously, moving down the bank under cover of darkness. The pool was quiet, empty but for the steady voice of the water. He waded in, caught a single salmon, and left without lingering. The river bend was still his, in scent and in memory. But the air there carried a new truth. Territory meant nothing if it could be crossed by something that killed from far away. And Bran knew, as he lay in the shadows of the pines, that the summer ahead would not be a fight for dominance, it would be a fight for survival itself. The days after the clash at the river bend were lean. Bran avoided the open banks where the humans had fired their thunder weapons. He kept to the shaded streams, but the fish there were fewer, quicker, slipping away into deep pools. His ribs began to show beneath the thick summer coat. Hunger pushed him farther each night, driving him across ridges he had never crossed before. It was hunger that led him to the meadow. The air there was rich with scent berries, heavy on their stems, the musk of small mammals, the faint but unmistakable tempts of meat. Bran followed it to the far edge of the grass, where a patch of bare earth lay open among the roots. In the center sat a chunk of flesh, thick and red, its smell almost dizzying. But there was something else. Under the meat's rich scent was another, cold, metallic, and wrong. Bran paused, nose twitching. The earth around the bait was disturbed, pressed flat in a perfect circle. In the middle, the soil gleamed faintly as if wet with dew, except it was not dew, it was iron. He had smelled it once before, on a tree that had held a strange loop of wire. His mother had led him away without explanation, her urgency unmistakable. Now, the same warning prickled along his spine. He circled the patch slowly. The meat lay on a flat piece of metal, its edges hidden under dirt and leaves. The scent of human clung to it, faint but fresh. This was no gift, this was a trap. Hunger gnawed at him like teeth. His body ached for the fat and blood that lay just a few paces away. But some instinct, deep and unyielding, told him to turn away. He left the meadow, the smell of the meat following him like a ghost. That night, the wind shifted, carrying another sound from the meadow, the heavy snap of metal, striking metal, followed by a thrash, a cry unlike any Bran had heard before. It was short, high, and ended abruptly. The forest fell silent afterward. When Bran passed that way again days later, the meadow smelled only of trampled grass, human sweat, and blood. The meat was gone, so was whatever had taken it. The lesson settled into him as clearly as any his mother had taught. Hunger could kill you faster than starvation if it made you forget caution. Still, the hunger did not fade. With the river bend dangerous and the berry slopes picked clean, Bran had to range even farther. He crossed into territory where the scent of wolves was thick, where the trees grew sparse and the ground broke into rock. He hunted marmots, dug for roots, and once, in desperation, chased a deer calf until his legs trembled with exhaustion. It was not enough. One evening, as the sky darkened to violet, Bran stood on a ridge overlooking the forest below. The air was cool, the wind gentle, and from somewhere far off came the distant murmur of the river. Between him and that sound was a truth he could not ignore. If he wanted to survive, he would have to return to the places that had nearly killed him. And so, as the first stars pricked the sky, Bran began the long walk back toward the bend in the river, where danger and plenty lay side by side. Autumn returned with the sky washed in copper and gold. The ridges blazed with color maples and scarlet, birches and gold, spruce still dark and steady among them. The air carried the dry rustle of leaves, the musk of ripe berries, and the faint edge of frost in the mornings. Bran felt the old urgency rise again, the push to eat, to grow heavy before the first snow fell. But this year was different. This year the forest was smaller. The human scent was stronger than ever along the northern edge, and their machines had chewed away another bite of the trees. The dark bear's presence still lingered to the south, though Bran had not seen him in weeks. The wolves had moved through twice already, their howls threading the night air, and the river Ben Bran's heart place was still rich with salmon, but it lay on the knife's edge between safety and death. He returned anyway. The pool shimmered with silver as fish gathered in the slow water before the rapids. Bran moved carefully, scanning the bank above for any sign of humans. The wind was clean, carrying only the scent of pine and fish. He waded in, muscles steady, and struck fast. The first salmon came easily, fat and strong from the sea. He hauled it onto the gravel and tore into it, the oily flesh filling him with warmth. He was halfway through his third fish when the wind shifted. The human scent hit him like a stone fresh, close. He froze, ears high, eyes scanning the tree line. A shadow moved above the bank. Then another. From the underbrush came a sound he knew too well, the click of metal. Bran bolted for the deeper water just as the first crack split the air. The shot missed, kicking up spray near his shoulder. He dove the current, tugging at his legs, the cold biting into his skin. Another shot rang out, then another, the sound bouncing between the cliffs. And then, through the chaos, another sound tore the air, a roar, deep, rolling, furious. The dark bear charged down the opposite bank, a massive shadow in the amber light. He didn't run for the water, he ran straight at the humans. Crashes of brush, shouts, and the sharp tang of fear hit the wind. The shot stopped. The forest roared with the sound of something larger than fear itself. Bran scrambled up the far bank, heart pounding. The dark bear stood at the tree line, his chest heaving, his eyes locking with Bran's across the water. There was no challenge in that look, no claim, only a grim, wordless understanding. They turned in opposite directions, each melting into the forest. For days afterward, Bran kept to the deeper woods, feeding on the last berries, stripping the mountain ash of its red fruit, tearing open logs for beetles. His body grew heavy, his coat thickened. The nights came earlier now, the frost heavier. When he finally returned to the den site he had chosen high on a rocky slope, the snow had begun to fall in slow, soft flakes. He circled inside the hollow, pressing the earth flat, then lay down with his head toward the entrance. The wind outside carried the scent of pine and cold stone. Before sleep took him, Bran's mind touched the river bend one last time, the flash of silver in the current, the roar of the dark bear, the shared defiance in the face of something greater than both of them. This was his forest now, not because he ruled it without rival, but because he had survived it, and when the snow melted and the rivers ran again, he would wake to claim it all over.